Hey folks, Lenny Lawson, the car guru, and if you didn't know better, you would think I was an agent for the Federal Trade Commission. I've been making phone calls to some of my competitors, and I told them, several of them, that if I ever had an issue with any type of what I consider to be, or I guess my interpretation of the law, that their advertising was illegal, then I would, rather than turn them in, I would call them personally. So that's what I did. So I guess I'm a Fed now, a federal enforcer. Now, I had this competitor that was basically offering a sale price online that was a discount, involved a discount that was unobtainable. There's not that much margin in the vehicle. Let's say that a particular vehicle has $2,000 markup. Would you say something's fishy if they're offering $7,000 off? I mean, the average consumer sees that and they say, hey, we need to go there. They're way less than that other dealer. But then they get there and the salesperson says, oh, no, well, you got to add back this. See all this extra stuff on this extra little sticker? You got to add that back. Now, is that deceptive? Yeah, I think so. But people fall for it all the time. You know what the next words out of that salesperson's mouth usually are? Well, we'll probably end up knocking all that off anyway. What kind of monthly payment you looking for? And then the customer just falls right into the trap. Oh, we're looking about $450 a month. And so the salesperson says, well, we can probably do that. Let me get some information from you. So they fill out a credit app, call it in. They come back. The payments are actually $575 a month. The customer has no idea what they're paying for the car. This is what happens, folks. You've got to look at the numbers. You got to scrutinize the numbers. First, you have to understand, what is the MSRP on this vehicle? What is MSRP? That's manufacturer's suggested retail price. And every new vehicle has one, an MSRP, that is. So you find that. Then if you are internet savvy, you go online, find out what the dealer paid for the vehicle, what the invoice price is. Now, is that his actual cost? See, this gets confusing too. What a dealer pays for a vehicle from the factory is initially their cost, but the factory has something called holdback, which means they hold back a little bit of a discount that they pass on to the dealer. They can get it, or I can get my holdback within a week. Used to be once a quarter, like every 90 days, I would get my holdback check. And when I was a Chevrolet dealer, it was 3% of the MSRP minus freight. That was the holdback. Well, they don't do it that way anymore. We still get it, but if you take the invoice price minus the holdback, then that is our net cost. And we do get some floor plan assistance. The manufacturer helps us carry our inventory or helps pay our carrying cost for about 90 days. And then we get some advertising assistance as well. It's called co-op. And so you could consider that money as part of the discount, but really it's to offset expenses that we have. And it's not unusual. Many businesses have, most retail businesses, if it's my tractor dealership, for example, we get co-op money all the time from the manufacturer. They help us pay for our advertising. It doesn't pay for all of it, but it's very helpful. And then on tractors and lawnmowers, we also get free floor planning for up to a year, which means that the manufacturer, which in our case would be Ferris and Grasshopper and TYM is our tractor line, they pay the interest to the bank for our floor plan. So not only are we not tying up our cash on inventory, but we don't have to pay any interest on it. Now, we better sell it within a year. Now, automakers don't do that. They go anywhere from 75 to 90 days and help you with your floor plan costs. But beyond that, we're paying all the interest, and it's not cheap. So sometimes we confuse our business expenses. People say, well, you're making a lot of money on that. Well, not really, because we got to pay our bills. We've got a lot of expense that we have to pay out of that gross profit dollar in order to be able to survive. Poor car dealers. In many cases, it's tough. There have been years where we've lost tons of money because of economic situations, recessions, wars, terrorists flying airplanes into buildings. All of those things where, you get to the point where you're just hanging on by your fingertips and you're just hoping that you've got bankers and lawyers in some cases to help you survive it. But we have a pretty good track record. 55 years now we've been in this difficult business. But it's been rewarding as well. The best part for me now is just that I've got all these young people working for me, and my nephew and my daughters and my son-in-law and all the other great employees. Allows me to goof off every now and then and do a radio program / podcast and share the love. I'll be back in just 1 minute. So I was talking about the FTC and about advertising. So I called my competitor and I said, competitor, you're breaking the law. How am I breaking the law? Well, when you look at your advertising online and you look at your pricing, you can't give somebody a price on, when somebody clicks on a particular vehicle, there's MSRP and here's our price. But in reality, that's not our price because you have to add $4,000 in fees to it. The Federal Trade Commission just came out with new guidance. They sent, I think it was 97 different dealer groups, the largest dealer groups in the nation. That is basically an organization that owns multiple dealerships, like 30 or 40 or 100 and some different stores, like AutoNation and the Hudson Group and different dealer groups like that. The FTC sent a shot across the bow, so to speak, said, okay, guys, stop deceiving customers. When you put something on the page that says our price, that better be your price and no other ads. So I just wanted to make sure that my competitor knew that, because I told him that I would not turn him into the FTC or to the state of Tennessee, which their guidelines are a little bit different. But the FTC is the big dog, and the fine per occurrence, get this, $51,000 per occurrence. So if you go into their website and they've got 300 cars on their website and all of them are priced in an illegal way, it's 300 times 51,000. You think that would put a dent in somebody's attitude? I think it would. So what's frustrating is the rules for our particular state of Tennessee, is different than the federal rules in that you can charge a dock fee and you don't have to put it or include it in the price. You can use an asterisk beside the price. And that is supposed to tell people, say, okay, you got to look somewhere else to get the rest of the story. The fine print. So you finally scroll down if you're online and you see the fine print and it says $9.95 dock fee or plus $9.95 dock fee. Everything else is included. Well, the Federal Trade Commission, which is the big dog, says nay, nay, nay. That has to be disclosed right there beside the price or included in the price. And also, here's another goodie that a lot of dealers do, and I see this all over the Tri-Cities here, where the dealership says the only way to get this price is if you finance the car through them. That's also illegal, according to the Federal Trade Commission. You can't offer to sell something to somebody, well, in the car business, for a certain price and say, oh, if you don't finance it, it's $1,000 more. You know why they want to do that or can do that or think they can do that and get away with it is because they make more profit when they finance a car for you, because the bank or the credit union pays them a little bit of money to finance the car through that particular bank or credit union or captive like Ford Motor Credit or Toyota Motor Credit, whatever. And plus, the dealership has a better opportunity to sell aftermarket products such as extended warranties, gap insurance, and so on and so on. So they want you to finance the car. So, well, the price isn't going to be as good as that if you don't finance through us, so we can rip you off even more. But most people can't see through that. Why? Well, because they just don't know. They're not experienced. Some of them are, especially the cash buyers. You know, you people that have money, cash money to pay for a car, they can't rip you off unless you're just totally ignoring everything. You know, because you've got the freedom of mobility. You can use your feet. Let your feet do the walking. You know, walk to your car, get in and leave. Whereas a lot of people, I don't know what the mindset is, but I guess they're just overly trusting, or they're desperate. And I guess another or would be they are determined to get a new car because they told their friends and neighbors and fellow countrymen they're getting a new car. They're coming home with a new car. And they don't want to disappoint Uncle Fred. And so they make a bad decision and pay too much for a car and ignore all the other factors. We've talked about that. The way to avoid that is send me your email address, 423-552-2020. That's my cell phone number, 423-552-2020. Send me your email address, and I will send you a PDF of the My Car Guru guidebook, which breaks down how to negotiate a car deal. That and many other things. But if you use that, basically that process, you will never pay way too much for a car. You still may pay a little bit too much because you give in too quickly. There's no guarantee that you won't cave when you're negotiating. You know, it's just like the negotiating that we're doing right now with those nut jobs in Iran. You know, you can't show all your cards, and you can't act too, I don't know, excited about making a deal because your adversary can see that. And so, you know, you just don't get too excited. You just stay calm. You know, they want you to be excited. Excited people make bad decisions many times. And so you need to just calm down and follow the rules, the 4 targets. If you hit the 4 targets, you won't pay too much for a car. Okay, let's talk about what's going on in Japan right now. This is interesting. So I was reading an article about Nissan. And Nissan's had some struggles in recent years, not product struggles, just sales struggles in many markets. They've had a hard time. And they missed they bet too early on EVs, and they missed the hybrid thing. Whereas Toyota, they don't usually miss much anything. And they guessed right on the hybrid, and they had all kinds of hybrids, and that's one of the reasons Toyota is doing so well. Ford is doing well with their hybrids. Nissan has hybrids all over the world. They just don't have them here in the United States. Well, they're getting ready to fix that. But that's not what interested me. What interested me was the fact that this CEO of Nissan is talking about a consolidation of all the Japanese car companies so that they can compete. Now, there are 7 Japanese automakers. And, you know, you're familiar with Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and Mitsubishi. They're the big ones. And so they're saying that the only way they can effectively compete in the global market, especially against Korea. See, Korea was a non-factor, but they're not anymore. I mean, there's a lot of young people out there that are buying Hyundais and Kias, but 30 years ago, Hyundais and Kias were a laughing stock. They were junk. I mean, banks, when Hyundai first came out, they didn't even want to loan money on a Hyundai. I mean, they were just lousy cars, but the Koreans were smart. They consolidated. They also consolidated their supplier base, which means they can control from when the raw materials come out of the ground until they're shipping cars across the ocean. They even own the ships. And they are very powerful. Now that they have a lot of plants in the United States, they're even more powerful. And the Japanese feel very threatened, especially Honda. Honda's really struggling right now. Never thought I'd say that. But they're talking about a potential consolidation. Not that there'll be one company, but there'll still be 4 major companies that are working real closely together as far as technology is concerned. You know, I think they'll still maintain their different brands and their ideologies as far as their corporate structure is concerned, but they are going to start making stuff together. They're going to start using the same suppliers because Japan has to compete as an island. Yeah, it's an island, small one, and they don't have much of a domestic market. They do have some. Their markets are overseas, away from them. You know, that's one of the things that contributed to their desire to go into World War II is that they were just totally dependent on raw materials and oil and so many other things from other countries. They got tired of it. They decided they're going to take over China and Indochina and, you know, every other country in the South Pacific, eventually take over America. That didn't work. We stopped that, and we rebuilt them, and now they're suffering. They dominated for a long time. There was no Korean car market. Nothing. There was no Hyundai and Kia. It was just the Japanese and the Germans. The Italians were never really a factor in the United States, or the French. It was just the big 3, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler Corporation. And then, this was back when I got into the car business in 1978. That's just when Honda came out with the Accord and the Civic. And, you know, Toyota had been going for a long time, but they just weren't big-time players. But the Japanese got really good at manufacturing, and they convinced an entire generation of people, the baby boomers, that Japanese cars were better. And there's a lot of people out there that still think they are. They aren't, in my estimation, but, you know, the seed was planted and it grew full fruit. And then you had BMW and Mercedes and Audi. And, you know, they all tried to make inroads into this country. BMW's been very successful. Mercedes has as well. Audi, not so much. But now the Japanese are really worried, and they've got the brains and the power and the discipline to turn this around. But they've got a heck of a competitor with Hyundai and Kia right now. Okay, I'll be right back. I had a sad experience yesterday. I went and picked up a 1965 Alfa Romeo Spider 1600 Veloce. That's a long name, but it's a special car. It's a $80,000 to $100,000 car. And what was sad was I picked it up from an 87-year-old gentleman who is not well. And, you know, he's got a Ferrari in another garage. And he lives in I think I mentioned this the other day, but he lives in a house it's on the National Register of Historic Places, built in 1847, way out in the country in Greenback, Tennessee. And he just loves his cars. He was a Ferrari judge at a lot of different competitions, including the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance and the Cavallino event I think it's in West Palm or someplace like that in Florida, big-time Ferrari event. Well, he's a judge, so, I mean, when you're a judge at one of these events, you know more about Ferrari than anybody else does. He's an engineer, and he's not well. And I picked up his vehicle and spent a little time with him. I took my wife down there with me, and we met another mutual friend that helped me load the cars and get all the other stuff. And the records, I have never seen more detailed records on a vehicle than what this gentleman had. You know, I talk to folks about the importance of keeping records of your oil changes and keep that in your car. Anytime you spend any money on the car, just get a copy of the bill and fold it up, put it in your glove box. And then when you go trade the car, you've got all this great evidence that you took care of your vehicle. He had, I think, 4 ring binder notebooks. Every time he drove that car, he would make an entry into his journal about it, about how the car drove and what needs to be done next and the things that he needs to do to, the next time he takes it in for service. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. All the original documents for when the vehicle was purchased. And all of that adds tremendous value to this vehicle. But it was just emotional for me just to see him in the state that he is and to drive off with his car, his love, his friend for all these years. And it's possible that I may never see him again. I'll probably talk to him on the phone, but may not get to be in his presence, and I hate that. But this is what's happening to a lot of folks. We're just aging out. We're car collectors, and we've kept these vehicles in our basements or in our garages, and we've loved them and taken them to car shows and gone on wonderful drives with family members and so forth. And we just all come to that crossroads where we just can't do that anymore. And I'm trying to help people get rid of their cars. There's a lot of folks that are calling me right now, and it is it's a joy and it's a burden also because it takes a lot of time. I mean, this particular car, I've already taken over 100 pictures of that car. I've got all the books. My office looks like a total wreck right now because I've got everything spread out trying to organize all the records. This one's an outlier, though. This one is a whole lot more burdensome from a documentation standpoint than many others. A lot of people that, I don't have anything. No, I didn't keep any of that. They don't have any records whatsoever, and that really hurts the value of it. But if you have an old car or know somebody that does, and they're getting older, now's the time to think about getting rid of it because the market is getting softer. Because, like I say, for certain car segments, 50s, 60s, these cars are starting to drop because the people who love those cars are dying. And many of their children and grandchildren, they're just not interested in them. Now, there are some cars that are always going to have some degree of interest, like Mustangs, vintage Mustangs and Broncos and Corvettes and BMWs. Certain vehicles are going to continue to be popular. But now, what's selling now are vehicles from the 80s and 90s. And even the early 2000s, it's hard to believe that a vehicle built in 2003 would be an antique, but it absolutely does qualify. 25, well, in some states 20 years, but 25 years is generally accepted as the point where a vehicle becomes an antique. So if you've got one, you better be thinking about what you're going to do with it. Well, thanks for listening to this edition of My Car Guru. Let me know if you have any issues, 423-552-2020, and I'll see you next time.